Hello guys, welcome to the channel. This is the story about what if Naruto was the Jinchuuriki of 9 Bijuu x Highschool DxD Part 1. Before I start the video, please subscribe the channel for more fanfiction video and please share this video with your friends. This story was written by Havoc Tear. With any more interception, let's start the video. Lost page 3.5. Original Naruto vs Artemis. Naruto stood upon the sensing the hatred that now surrounded him, and called out internally, calls out, "Shukaku, I need you on defense, nothing can get past us." Shukaku cracks his back, stretching like any other canine, before grunting, "And nothing will." Naruto smirked, turning to Chome. "Gonna need all the eyes I can get. You ready, Chome?" Chome buzzed and nodded. "Consider it done." Naruto broke into a grin as he looked to his favorite Nekomata. "Matabi. Gonna need to be able to react ahead of time. Care to lend me your strength?" Matabi purred as she offered a paw. "Always." Naruto nodded, fist bumping the flaming feline. Back outside, Naruto slowly raised to his feet, head held low as he took a breath, mentally counting the enemies via their hatred that spiked again as he stood. 21, and they are moving to encircle him. Their spacing suggests visual range communication. Counter. Matabi speaks first. "You have access to my claws, remember, they're by far your strongest option." Naruto replied as swiftly, "True, however they prevent me from using more than a few of my techniques. Weapons too. Their last line of resort. Trump card, if you will." Son Goku interjected himself here, speaking with pride. "Then, you are using my blades then, huh?" Naruto didn't reply, and the ape didn't need him to, as he watched Naruto's haori flap in the wind, and his hand slowly and methodically, and somehow menacingly drew his Bijuu-issued tanto from the small of his back. His left hand plucked a three-pronged kunai from its holster, and he takes up a defensive stance. Kunai held reverse grip ahead, tanto at his back to strike. The hatred sources altogether spiked as their intent became squarely focused on him. He could feel their rage in the wind. Now that's an idea. The next moment both blades were coated in razor winds, just as the first shots were fired. 9 and 3 o'clock. With a single twirl on the balls of his feet, Naruto deflected the silver arrows away harmlessly, despite still keeping his eyes shut. The 21 signatures fell off briefly, but 20 came back stronger than before, and the intent to kill along with them. The feel of parting air, from multiple directions, soon reached the shinobi, and he gripped his blades tighter. This many archers, at this range, and this well-trained, is going to be a real challenge, even for him. A caw was called from up high, and the next moment Naruto Uzumaki was about to show the Greek pantheon the folly of crossing him. The folly of fighting him as he defends his family and friends. For challenging him in a forest, they may not be the same ones he grew up with, nor the ones he had laid his life down to protect, but they were close enough. Like a bolt of lightning, Naruto was in movement, cutting left, slicing 3 arrows in one wind-enhanced slash, deflecting 2 from ahead, ducking beneath the 2 from behind, flipping up, slashing right another 1, and far more powerful than the rest. The explosion blasted through a tree. This told Naruto that one was far more powerful than the rest, and he cannot take this lightly. Landing on his feet, swiveling on the balls of his feet, the wind around his tanto exploded as he swiped hard, knocking off the next wave off course. 4 more. 12, 9, 6, and 3 o'clock. Naruto calling out, "Shukaku." A mound of sand erupts from behind, as the wind explodes from both weapons that slash across one another, causing gale force crosswinds in the remaining 3 off course, while the sand catcher, the one at 6 o'clock. The wind's flicker across his whiskers caused him to flip his tanto into a reverse grip and call out mentally, "Matabi, Shukaku. Gonna need you both." "Got it." Both called back, and in response the azure flames erupt from his tanto, and thick sandy winds from his kunai as he swipes again and catches a single high-speed arrow between them. Sparks fly as he is pushed back, beginning to lose ground, when Son Goku and Kakuo come in clutch. The ground begins to melt, and Naruto's legs begin to steam, allowing him to resist the pushback as he finally deflects the attack off to the side. The explosion rocked the forest, scattering the few birds that had remained. Taking a quick breather, he glances at his tanto, and surely enough there are more than a few cracks running across its entire length. Kissing his teeth, he retunes it to his holster, with Son Goku adding, "Better the weapon than you, Naruto. Don't sweat it." Flicking another kunai into his now free hand, Naruto nods, replying, I know. Just that you've spent so much time on them. He doesn't have time to lament on that thought for long as the next coordinated barrage began. Naruto takes a deep breath, whispering internally. Shomei, you're up now. Matabi, time to show time itself that it needs to speed up. Both Bijuu smirk, nodding to that, and MCM flashes up, body loosening up, synapses firing at unrecordable rates that supercomputers would be jealous of. His eyes, however, become compound and catch every single movement. Just in time. 2 from either side, 3 and 9, with a second wave from 4 and 11 directly after. Staggered attacks. Oh sweet summer children. Basic. Using acrobatics that would have set world records, Naruto bent around both first 2, then flipped over the second 2. The hidden third wave was sliced through by the flowing winds supplied by his Tanuki friend. Another high-powered shot appeared before he touched down, only to be bicycle kicked clear of the blonde, who lands in a 3-finger handstand, pushing off with a blast of steam, over the next 6 that impacted 2 seconds after he left. Another flip, and he slips out another trio of kunai, flicking his equipped off in opposite directions, taking hold of a fresh 2 before kicking the last loose one off at the target at 8 o'clock, and landing with a graceful flourish, crouched with a single arm down. It seems planning has gone out the window and a fire at will given as now a flood of silver ripped through the trees. Again, Naruto held no emotion on his face. Stamping his left foot down, and a chunk of rock rose to block his aid till 11 o'clock, allowing him to focus to the other side. Again his hands were a blur, cutting or deflecting the arrows, flipping and weaving in impossible-to-track patterns with feline levels of flexibility and reactions. For a solid 10 seconds he cut through, flipped, or bent out of the way of at least 60 projectiles. Some were close, but this is a fight, it wasn't good enough. This ended when the rock at his back exploded, and he flipped up again, and like last time his kunai slipped from their holsters as he spun, and an eruption of wind happened to blast them in all directions. Angles that may have been in the directions that may have an archer in them. As he dropped, now unarmed due to his clumsy behavior, he can sense the powerful sniper-like shot speeding towards him, and he grinned, internally calling, Ishibumi. Gonna need your stopping strength. He feels the nod as the Three Tails chakra rushes forward into his joined arms, held up in a defensive position, and the bracers there hardened to impossibly dense levels. The collision was interesting. Again, Son Goku and Kakuo were reinforcing his legs, supporting the defensive effort. Eventually he sensed shots coming from all sides, which caused Son Goku to flare his chakra, immediately sink the ground directly beneath Naruto. As he falls, the arrow he had been blocking ricochet off at the increased angle of attack. The explosion from the arrow's impact hid the hole from view. Naruto takes a breather as all the various chakra in his system begins to return to the seal, leaving his chakra coils burning somewhat. It wasn't too bad, but like a faint tingle. Looking up, he notices the dust was slowly clearing, so Naruto calls out his backup kunai from his wrist seals before taking a very deep breath to calm his racing heart. With his eyes shutting on the first exhale, he locks in on the sources of hatred. His second deep breath overlaps his kunai beacons atop that mental map. They lined up. They must have thought they were failed counterattacks upon them, so did not bother checking them. Naruto grinned as once again winds flood his kunai that he grips tighter, whispering below a breath, Namikaze art. Hirishin level 3. In a golden flash, Naruto vanished, and over the next 10 seconds 20 similar flashes ripple throughout the forest, followed by girls screaming loud from slashes across their backs. The screams told Artemis that her entire elite unit was just taken down in one go. How? That human was. She blinked. She tracked a kunai flying right at her. Letting an arrow fly, she spots a second off to the right. She leaps up to the next branch only to hear a thud to her right. A golden flash, and a foot was barely blocked by her abrupt defense. Pale moon meet yellow and green. For all of half a second they just stared as the shockwave of air flowed through the auburn and blonde hairs. The goddess narrowed her eyes as she pushed his foot back, and pulls her hunting knives, whereas Naruto vanished into another flash of gold. With her natural-born instincts, she ducks beneath a blade of wind, barely visible to the naked eye, and she leaps after the male. Just as she catches sight of him again, he vanishes in a golden flash, appearing off to her right mid-slash that she blocks, then kicks out. Naruto uses said leg as a handhold, flipping over the block, and leads into a reverse heel kick. Artemis lands hard, on her feet as she slides, but again the second she looks up a flash of gold and Naruto was there mid-strike with wind-coated kunai. She deflects the double swipe, and follows it with a flowing kick. Again, with feline grace, Naruto uses said leg as a footstep to aid his horizontal momentum, and threw his kunai at her at their point-blank range. Artemis ducks aside to avoid the threat, yet as she lunges for a counter-strike, Naruto flashes away again, before reappearing on her opposite side, spinning ball of white chakra in hand. Not understanding what it was, the goddess used both her blades in a cross-guard to block it. The attack exploded on contact, knocking both parties back. Artemis flipped mid-air and landed on her feet though she had been disarmed. A first for her. Another yellow flash and she ducks aside as another wind slash cuts through the tree she was beside. Sliding to a stop, she forms new daggers, just in time to block the flash and double downward slash. Up close, Artemis can now clearly see the feline-like eyes and smell of this male. It made sense of his reaction times now. He must have some feline relation. Yet before she could formulate further she felt something grab her ankles. Abruptly she was yanked beneath the dirt up to her neck and pinned in place. Stunned for all of 5 seconds, Artemis glared at the male ahead of her who just grinned foxily back before waving and vanishing in another flash of gold. 5 minutes later, he flashed back to find the goddess still in place. Naruto nodded at that. It seems suppression seals still work in this world as intended. She glared up at him upon the clearing of the golden flash. Not knowing her problem with him is, Naruto approaches and places his hand on her head. She screams at him, trying to bite his hand, but Naruto didn't care and together they flashed back to the original clearing, now much bigger and littered with craters. As soon as they both appear, Artemis lands on her front, face in the dirt, but the call-out of Lady Artemis napped the goddess up to see all her hunters gathered and bound before the surviving oak tree. Artemis muttered, "Girls." Her glare turned murderous as she looked back to Naruto who was standing above her and she goes to summon her daggers but nothing happens. Again, she tries but nothing. Her eyes widen in horror, as Naruto grinned, arms crossed, announcing, "You have no power here, lady. I suggest you shut up and behave or things will only get worse for you." His voice grew colder throughout his sentence. Eyes too brokered no argument as his killing intent slowly began to rise. Naruto was in no mood for games. He was simply relaxing and getting some rest among the leaves like he used to, and these guys come in jutsu flying. What the fucking hell? Just then, a caw from up high drew eyes up as a single raven flew down and landed on Naruto's left shoulder. Or tried to, as he seemed to flash away again, before returning behind Artemis and glaring at the crow, growling low, "Show yourself. You are no raven." The raven cawed again as it dropped into the shadows, that grew even darker as eventually outsteps a fairly well-endowed looking teen with long, striping black hair above a cute childish face, pointy ears and a smile Naruto would recognize anywhere. A sadistic smile buried beneath a cheery facade. The shadows seemed to make up her frilly, one-piece sundress, but calling it that seems about hypercritical as it's made out of something Naruto would say was if the night was given form. Elegantly and with purpose, this woman smiled filled with a cheer that put Naruto on edge the closer she slinked towards him. Gasps from the captives as they notice her frame and recognize that power, it could only be one primordial. Artemis growls, "Nyx, what are you doing here?" The now identified Nyx giggled far too innocently for Naruto's liking. It was so artificial and well practiced his shinobi senses were running wild. Nyx finally speaks up. "Come now, Artemis dear. Is that any way to talk to your superior?" Artemis growled deeper, but a cough at her back reminded her of her current position, powerless and at the mercy of this male. A cold sweat ran down her back as she mechanically turned and glanced back to see the absolute steely gaze of the male on Nyx that it was unsettling. Naruto did not know their history, but he did not like this situation. It was getting out of hand and even Diedrich was shifting uncomfortably. So he cut in before a catfight breaks out. "No offensive, Mata. I do not mean to be rude, but you have been following me all day. Explain yourself as I am in no mood for games." That damn giggle from Nyx who grinned as she looked over the clearly wounded hunters all gathered together and bound with some kind of runes preventing their powers from activating. As expected of the true sage. She spoke. To defeat the best of the hunters of Artemis so effortlessly. So beautifully. Filled with grace and ruthless efficiency that gets me all hot and bothered. Naruto knew this type all right. His battle against a certain special Jonin came to mind. But let's not unpack that, as he says. Get on with this. We do not have all day. She smiled at him, before nodding and getting somewhat serious, Nyx informing. I just happened upon you after coming to verify my information about your defeat of the Red Dragon Emperor. I admit I was skeptical, but this has all but confirmed my suspicions. So, I have come to offer only an introduction. My name is Nyx, a primordial goddess of the night. She courtesies with a big beautiful smile that sickened Naruto as another face superimposed upon hers briefly, blooded with dead eyes but smiling nonetheless. Nyx continued, unaware of Naruto's thoughts. It is a pleasure to meet you, true sage of 6 paths. Naruto's eyes narrowed on this woman, so she was looking for him, and the gasps from the bound group show that they too were looking for him greatly. Now what to do about this? She said this was only an introduction, so no doubt she will. His through too were cut through when Artemis barraged him and the shadows behind him retreated, having successfully accomplished their task. Naruto glanced around and spotted the returning shadows. Damn it. He wasn't thinking about the Nara-like abilities. This is terrible. What did she just do? Nyx giggled again as she began to step away. Well, I have what I wanted to do completed. I will be seeing you, sage. I will be in touch. As she began to sink into the darkness, her parting words caused him to grow concerned, Nyx saying, as for my gift, consider it my ticket payment for giving me such a splendid showing. Shoving Artemis off him, he growled, Gift? What are you getting at? She giggled again, before her whisper reached his ear. Cracks show potential for a future, no? Pondering those words for a moment, it was Son Goku who figured it out first. Naruto boy, you're tonto. Retrieving said blade on reflex, Naruto spots that the cracks were now filled in with darkness itself that flowed with a sense of unending darkness that rippled from handle to tip then back. He kissed his teeth, muttering, damn. Gonna have to throw this away now. Over a year of service. Down the fucking drain. Artemis cleared her throat, drawing the solid steel mix-matched gaze of the annoyed shinobi, her hands shooting up immediately. Wait, we mean no more trouble. Naruto snorted at that, sliding his blade back into the holster on the base of his back. Only after I defanged you all. Doesn't give much weight to your words at this point. Artemis inclined her head at that, let out a breath before asking, so, you're the sage that we sensed a few days ago? Naruto growled, not gracing that with a response as he turned inward. Okay guys, what should we do? Amaterasu's office. The sun goddess was silently contemplating the story she was just told of the one known as sage within her domain at present. Amaterasu knew his true name but would never utter it aloud, as there is no telling who could be listening. It was a strange thing for the Shinigami to insist on, but she would not argue over something so trivial. Amaterasu understood now that he was certainly not a threat to them, no, but indirectly he is. His very presence within the Shinto Pantheon's domain had already prompted that arrogant man to send his daughter. The same daughter currently sitting behind their bars. Holding that thought for now, she also pondered whether she could offer this sage a position in her court. After all, thanks to Tsukuyomi's actions they had an opening. Then again, she is likely not the only one who'd have that idea. Plus, the part of the deal that Shinigami had given in order to learn about him was that he not be pressed into service. Frowning at that, Amaterasu sighed as she looked up from her paperwork, then off to the side of her desk where her new mirror was showing the location of said sage. She was tracking him when she could. It was a conscious effort to do so, and if she focused it too much, he would sense it and vanish again, meaning she'd have to start all over again. He truly is a shinobi of that world. Letting out a tight breath, the sun goddess thought on the world in question. It's in Shinigami's roster, as apparently there was a clan there that interested him, one that the sage belonged to. Capable of being your best friend, or absolute nightmare given physical form. The rest of the inhabitants, however, they are indeed at peace as per that world's prophecy, but it was twisted. Warped in a way that even the Shinigami had not predicted. They were united by Naruto, fought beside him against a primordial god, the bigger threat. The second that was over, they ejected the boy, and he became their enemy. The sacrifices made for his freedom were great and have clearly taken their toll. He was jumpy. Paranoid beyond belief. Distrustful of all but his own. Yet even after all the heartache and tragedy he has experienced, he is still willing to lend a hand. Amaterasu knew that, if they were ever in true and undeniable danger, the sage will be the first to step up. The problem is that he will also be the first to vanish once said danger had passed. Not seeking rewards or glory. Just doing the right thing. They are safe as long as he walks or lands. Though, if anyone else from that world makes it here, she herself will end them, and their final sight will be of her black flames. Underworld stepping into the room. Akeno finds her best friend dressing herself. Or at least attempting to. Rias had not gotten back use of legs. She trying to pull up sweatpants, one after the next. Just before she let out a growl in her frustration, Akeno appears and wordlessly helps out. One leg at a time. After the drama had been settled, Rias looks to her friend and offers a smile, hoping it looked genuine. It didn't, but Akeno didn't seem like she wanted to point it out as the heiress inquired. So, Akeno, what's the latest? Akeno takes a seat on the side of the bed and looks to her friend before she informed her of the said latest. Well, it seems that Menma was sighted in Kuo. Rias shuddered at the thought, but before she could reply, Akeno continued. Twice. The first time was at Issei's house. Rias gasped. Yes, Mickey is fine. Akeno cut her off smiling, taking up her friend's hand, then added with a hint of mirth. In fact, she was rather impressed with his kindness and willingness to help her with her shopping. Rias raised a brow, clear disbelief written over her face, and the ravenet nodded at that. Akeno then explained. Yes. That was our reaction too. Apparently, he was lost and confused. She found him and asked for help. He smiled and did so wordlessly. The Gremory chuckled, shaking her head in disbelieving that woman. Rias offered almost breathlessly. How does she get away with asking for anything from one of the most dangerous rogues in recent history for help with groceries? Akeno giggled at that, nodding while she replied. Kiba was just as bewildered. She didn't stop talking about him for a good hour. Everything from his smile to his old-fashioned accent and mannerisms. Rias chuckled lightly, then commented. Yeah, I noticed that too. Though, Menma's ID looked like that too, so it's to be expected. The redhead suddenly found herself in an embrace from her most loyal friend. She was confused for all 2 seconds before Akeno whispered. I know it's hard, Rias. I promise you things will get better. I swear on it. Rias gripped the Miko outfit wearing friend of hers. No, her sister from another mister. With all her might, and tears fell. Tears fell unseen by all. Though, one former dragon host heard as he was at the door. Each tear increased his rage. Each tear set his goal. Menma will pay for hurting his Bucha. Issei hadn't known this yet, but this choice would lead him to an ending where the one he wished to protect would be the one he opposed. After an unspecified amount of time, I wasn't allowed to say, Rias had calmed down and laid back into her seat with puffy eyes and cheeks. After a sniffle, she asked. What about the second sighting? You said he was spotted twice. Akeno nodded, but before she said anything she discreetly created a small soundproofing barrier. This got a raised brow from her king. Rias has never seen Akeno be the sneaky before. What could be so important that she didn't want anyone else to hear or know of? Letting out a deep breath, Akeno spoke carefully. There were unconfirmed reports for the first few hours, but less than an hour ago they were confirmed. The seriousness was not lost on Rias, who inclined her head to continue. Akeno does so and explained. Menma fought against the goddess Artemis. Rias's eyes widened in shock. 2 reasons for this. Firstly, Menma fought against a bona fide goddess. Second, that a Greek goddess was operating in Shinto territory. Wars have started for less. Rias then asked promptly, who won? Akeno sighed first, but answered anyway. We don't know. By the time our teams got there, they were both gone. Rias then pressed. Where did this happen? Atop a housing complex on the near the center of town. Rias was naturally concerned. The fact that a seemingly rogue god came looking for the rogue sage in Kuo and that both clashed means that the likelihood of them returning without significant guard presence is unlikely. The council would never allow that. Akeno cut into her friend's thoughts calmly as she announced. Rias. I have a plan, and I need you to promise me something. Rias locked into her friend's purple eyes. Her sea-green eyes hard with more steel than Akeno has seen since this all began. The heiress asked seriously. Akeno, what are you planning? Akeno stays silent for a few moments, silently gathering her resolve to offer her friend and sister that answer. She did after the 10-second mark and spoke firmly. I will find him. Bring him here and have him heal you. I know, this is dangerous. I know you don't like me going and potentially getting hurt or worse, killed. Rias remains silent, allowing her queen to take a breath, gripping her gown to gather herself. Akeno then takes up something out of her pocket and reveals it to the redhead, who gasps. The priestess explained. I have been studying this. I don't know what it does exactly, but I think I have a way of tracking him with it. Looking from the cloth to her best friend, Akeno continued. If I tell the Satans, they'll gather a large number army and give chase. That will either lead to a slaughter, or he'll destroy this and then run again. That's why I will go alone. I need you to trust in me, Rias. The plea was not lost on the king of the peerage, and the fact that she was doing this for her. Rias was truly gifted with a sister who loved her. The downside was clear, however. Her brother will likely never approve of this, but if Akeno said she could be healed. Taking a deep breath, taking up her friend's hand, Rias spoke softly. I trust you, Akeno. If you think you can do this, I will not stop you. Just keep me informed on your whereabouts and if you ever need help. The rest went unsaid, and Akeno nodded with a smile as she replied. I understand, Rias. I promise I will come back to you. Rooftop Inko Sariel watches as her squad looks over the cracked rooftop with a critical, purple eye, trying to put together what exactly happened here. From what she can tell, that Sage was here when he released his power. All the cracks lead to the single point near the center. From Gabriel's report, the man has a shakuho when entering his full power mode, which explains the cracked concrete that spiders outward from the small hole. Looking to the back at the wall she stood besides, Syria notes another minor signature, almost non-existent, and it was not that of Artemis. No, this one was dark, really dark. There was a second celestial on this rooftop. From what the other archangels have told her, the sage confronted the Greek goddess of the moon here. From what they saw, the sage had originally been held at bow point, but upon him uncapping his power and forming of his weapon, Artemis had lost the will to fight. What the angel of death was confused on, however, was the presence of the Shinigami. Where does the Shinto Reaper comes into all this? Was it alone? Did the other Shinto deities arrive? That would make sense if they did not know that the Greek goddess was here. Syria feels like there is a missing piece of multiple somethings, and for the life of her she can't tell what it is nor why she thinks that. Just something was missing from this picture. She was brought out of her thoughts by her daughter, Zenobia reported. Lady Mother, the amount of celestial power here is projected to be rather high. If we take the decay rate we have observed and apply it to the time frame, there were 5 gods here. Sariel nodded but then corrected her. If we add Artemis and this unknown. She gestured to the general area she was standing beside, which caused Zenobia to question herself mentally. They did not detect anything there, but if her mother said there was, then there was. Simple child-parent logic. Zenobia jots that down, and nodded, then stated. Then we have 7 in the sage. We would have finished sooner, but. Both look across the rooftop where numerous birds have been gathering and pestering the other exorcists, who were trying to work and avoid harming the nesting birds who were still trying to build nests, as even the air seemed cleaner here too. The angel of death just nodded as she watched Irina duck beneath a few songbirds. Sariel finally says, it is fine. It is clear that the sage has made an effort to hide his tracks after leaving here. Something spooked him. Might be this signature, but I cannot be certain. Zenobia just nods along with the archangel she calls her mother, not asking the stupid nor predictable questions. Her mother was far more experienced than her in this field. Just learn what she could from this experience and become better at it in the future. Finally, Sariel looked up at her daughter, who stiffens, as she ordered. We are done here. Nothing we can do without a trail to track. The archangel paused for a moment, before she corrected herself. Actually, no, we will investigate this area for anything that might indicate what he was looking for here. We thought he was in Kyoto with the yokai. That is clearly not the case. The other exorcists nodded to their new orders, ready to get off this roof and out of attack range of the aerial assault of the avian population. Syria pushing off the building's cement waist-tall ledge, announcing, let us depart. We are done here. Kuo Forest. The night after the church forces arrived, another seeker arrived in the forest directly beside the town, who was guided by her own connection to nature. Kuroka the Stray has been on this trail for a while now. She was originally planning on going to Kyoto. However, their security had stiffened up significantly and she dared not tempt them. So, when she felt that beacon of energy a day and a half ago now, she decided to come and check it out. If it was the sage, then she needed to understand why he was here and try predicting his mindset to try and cut him off. This was of paramount importance to her specifically. During her travels, Kuroka had heard via the grapevine that this sage had apparently found a way to remove his rook piece. A mutated rook piece of the Gremory heiress. This excited her as maybe, just maybe, if Kuroka was lucky enough and explained her own plight, this sage might take out hers too. It was a long shot, but that is what she is hoping for. On the other hand, Kuroka had also heard about the other members of the Gremory peerage and their fate. Her Chiron was injured, a broken femur. That brought a frown to her face. She was mad that the sage had dared to lay a hand on her precious little Chiron. Though, even she would admit that the situation probably didn't permit him to take it easy on anyone. Not even her cute little Chiron. She is mad, yes. Without a doubt. However, a small part of her, just a small part mind you. A small part understands he did not have a choice. Pair that with the fact that it was only one broken bone compared to the others in the group, and the sea-tree peerage who were manhandled far harsher than her little Chiron. She was thankful that the sage only broke a bone, as it was clear that he had held back. Kuroka froze. Her paw still in the air as she glanced into the shadows around her. Someone, no multiple eyes on her. Focusing her senjutsu, she realizes she was now surrounded. Lowering her paw, twin tails still, the black cat began to back up whilst lowering her center of gravity, as from under the shadows of the fallen tree off to her 2 o'clock came out a stalking fox. Its eyes fixed on her. Kuroka did not have to ponder this long, as from her rear left, another pounced on her, and were it not for her numerous years on the run, she would have fallen into that. The second the fox passed below her abrupt acrobatics display, Kuroka found herself twirling around the second one's pounce, but this time her senjutsu saved her as she lashed out with a back kick. A kick that managed to land on the fox's nose, knocking it off course enough for he to land again. With all feet on the ground, Kuroka sped off in somewhat disbelief as the 2 foxes chasing her had been joined by another 2 pairs off to her flanks, running parallel with her. She ducks and weaves, yet they remained alongside her. Since when street foxes have a sense for pack tactics? As they closed the box in formation, Kuroka had to think quickly. The 2 beside her are preparing to cut her off, if she recalls this formation properly. Just as her hunters pounce, Kuroka darted up the same tree they had tried to use to block her path. She ran and kept running up the tree until she passed by the leaves a good 3/4 of the way up. Now safely up the tree, Kuroka took a moment to try and understand that someone, somehow, somewhere, had taught these foxes pack tactics and trap setting. This tree, had she been a normal cat, would have trapped her escape from their subsequent attack. When she finds out who the fuck taught these foxes something so fucking dangerous, she'll shove her claws down their throat before slicing it open. In the sealed space, Kurama suddenly peeked an eye open as he chuckled deeply and filled with amusement, gaining Isobu's attention seeing as he was the only one awake right now. The turtle is on watch tonight. After half a minute the fox closes his eye again and promptly falling asleep again. Amaterasu's office Shinigami enters the sun goddess's office and spots her looking at her new viewing mirror. Though, at current it seems that brunette with golden red eyes wore a frown with her eagle-like expression was anything to go by. A throat clearing broke the leader of the Shinto pantheon from her displeasure, looking up at the Lord of Death, with a raised brow before facing him and regaining her regal posture. This is certainly a surprise, Lord Shinigami. Twice in so few days. The incarnation of death took no offense as it just shrugged before it replied. I just wanted to inform you that I will be guiding the sage into a certain direction for both our safety and his mental well-being. He will remain within our domain but will be out of the way for a little bit. The leader of the Holy Shinto Trinity was surprised at that. Wasn't she warned about doing just that not even a full day ago? Yet, she felt that she needed to voice this and thus Amaterasu asked, "Why are you?" Shinigami sensed this coming a mile off and raised its deathly hand, stopping her before it explained simply. I am the patron god of his clan, Lady Amaterasu. It is my duty in that regard. I am about to embark on a journey back to his homeworld as I wish to check more thoroughly of the fate of the scattered remnants. If they have been scattered further or wiped out, I wish to know how and why. The goddess of the sun had no counter as that was indeed his right, though this was also a first as none have ever heard of the Shinigami claiming to a patron of anyone prior to this. Her guest continued, unaware of her trail of thoughts. That being said, it is why I am guiding him now as I will be unavailable to aid him until my return. Thus, my guiding hand to a safe location. He will likely figure it out himself before I return, but I will confront him should he ask for answers. Amaterasu inclined her head briefly, understanding what was not said, then responded. Very well, I shall keep an eye on him during your absence. Shinigami smirked knowingly but remained silent before turning around and departing silently as a ghost. Olympus, the 11 remaining Olympian, +1, watched as Apollo's recording of the fight between Artemis and her hunters against the sage. There were several times, however, where even Apollo lost sight of the sage, only to catch him later on, but they saw how he slipped and slinked through the forest. They missed the brief meeting with Nyx and only saw a fuzzy glimpse of his power-up before Amaterasu blocked Apollo. By the end of it, there was a mix of emotions in chamber. Surprisingly, it was Demeter who spoke first, looking at her youngest brother Zeus. We need him. Athena spoke next, leaning forward as she studied the projection Apollo was maintaining in the center. What does that script say? Ares chuckled as his bloodlust raises, grinning feral while gripping his chair's rests. I want to fight him. He seems like a good fighter. Hephaestus was thoughtful, and spoke with clear interest. Those weapons. What kind of material was able to cut through the arrows of celestial power like that? Athena only then realized that, and nodded to her brother. You make a good point. We need to get our hands on some of it to understand that. They could be dangerous to us. Apollo then added. His combat style seemed to revolve around fast-paced movement, precisely aimed, but damaging surprise attacks, and a heavy reliance on stealth. He crippled but did not kill. Ares chuckled deeply, looking to the blonde and nodded. They were not worth it. He knew that. Kept them out the fight with those attacks. Artemis would have lost if he went all out against them all. Athena looked to the bloodlust incarnate and was forced to agree with a grim nod before she too commented. He did not retreat because he would have lost, but rather because he was not interested in being forced to strike in anger. That much is obvious. Dionysus watched them all discuss things surprisingly calmly, but that might be because his father was clearly contemplating this carefully without any outbursts. Him actually thinking things over is a scary prospect, but what was bugging the wine god, however, was the movements this sage was making. He moved with practiced ease in a familiar way.
In recent years there are many veterans, and the way this sage moved was reminiscent of the meaning he has survived something world-shattering. For him at least, likely experiencing heightened levels of stress, paranoia, anxiety, and depression. Dionysus fears those types.
If pushed and they stop holding themselves back, their own demons, only bad things will be the result, and with this sage able to go toe-to-toe with them, that can be a very dangerous situation they're playing with. Demeter cut through the council of God's thoughts at once, when she bellowed. The life force he emitted was bountiful and almost unending. We need him to either help Pan, or... Zeus finally spoke up, cutting his sister off. Enough. We will await Artemis' report. I want to know exactly what happened, what that brief power surge was, and the nature of it, before we make our move. Demeter frowned at the order, clearly upset at the order of not moving, but she was not the only one. Though Dionysus was extremely thankful for the slow, methodical approach his father was taking, he and the others missed that there was another who might have to be restrained. After all, we have a strong male who was on par with them as gods, running around and kicking ass unaccompanied. He showed not an ounce of lust nor concern for his opponents, that were all girls, thus believed in equality of both genders. Clearly had an affinity with wind, like they did, and most likely had a god-killing body beneath that cloak and armor. Oh yes, mummy likes. Okinawa Prefecture nearly 3 months later. People were going about their business, enjoying their holiday on the pristinely kept beaches, and having fun making family memories under the bright blue skies and perfect amount of sunshine. None would have predicted you could find a sage, 9 yokai-like beings, and a dragon were helping run a family open-plan beachside bar for an elderly couple. Their kids had moved to the mainland some time ago, and the sage was exploring the island in an attempt to stay low 6 weeks ago. One thing led to another, then another, and the sage stayed back whilst one of his sisters happened to be a former doctor from Tokyo. She tended to the old man's strained back and then stumbled upon an acute tuberculosis in his wife. The family was nice enough to take over their cafe per bar for them, allowing them to recover peacefully. Since then, the couple would spend the time with each other and recover with a personal doctor with around-the-clock care, letting their guests run the shop in their stead and a place to stay, no questions asked. As such, with another beautiful day within the bar of Becky's Coral, one black-haired, black-eyed man, dressed in short-sleeve white shirt, tanned 3/4 lengths, and unusual sandals behind the bar. Currently, he can be seen wiping down cocktail glasses with a dishcloth whilst staring out at the crashing waves. His mind was elsewhere, clearly, as things have long since gotten quiet. Too quiet. His thoughts were broken through at the arrival of one of his family members, a short, blue shoulder-length haired woman, pale skin, and a cute face, but what was unique about her was her mix-matched eyes of yellow and green. She dropped down on one of the stools and then spoke. "Say, Naru-kun, why don't you come and sunbathe with us?" The man let out a heavy sigh, before he muttered back. "Mata. The name's Narian here, remember? You guys wanted me to take it easy, to stop and help, and I have put off my anxiety about this, so at least stay in character to help me relax, no?" She grinned, that cat-like grin he was familiar with, that spoke of her teasing nature as she replied. Fine, I get it. Though, I am still amazed at how long you've lasted." Naruto grunted, before placing the cup down on the rack. Glancing back at the woman, Matabi continued. "It's been 2 weeks since Kurama left. Is he doing well?" Her host nodded, as he reached for the bottles of alcohol on the top shelf. Naruto continued. "Yeah. That skulk has grown on him. Their coordination flawless. Last night they took down a stray devil. He bragged for most the hour." Matabi snorted, shaking her head at that fact. "I bet. How are our hosts doing?" Naruto gestured with his head to the door where a pale-skinned, thickness-given form, white hair that was braided down her back to her knees, a woman with sparkling silver eyes strolled in from the upstairs door in a white bikini top-skirt combo. Upon spotting her sister and now having heard the question's context, she answered, "Just to be safe, they'll be right as rain in a week. Though, I think they're just faking it to have more time off." Matabi smirked, looking at the human form of her favorite slug. "I bet." Saiken joined the duo, sitting on the stool beside Matabi, looked over at her host, then asked, "Why? Still having problem, Narian?" Naruto closes the ice cube fridge and rises to his feet before looking at the silver-eyed woman and stated, "Yes. Seeing as the on-season is upon us, we really should get moving. We've been some time now since we set up shop and I really don't like being stationary this long." Saiken sighs as she drops her head into her palm, elbow supporting it as she replied, "I'll return to the seal tonight. Check your levels again." Naruto frowned, then rebuffed, "Or, we can leave." A new voice from a man entering. "I second that." All three glance back, the women over their shoulder, to see a tall man with a clear runner's physique, spiked white hair currently holding sunglasses, a smile on his rounded face and hard brown eyes that vanish behind the dark lenses. "Of course you do, Kakugo." Matabi spoke flatly. "Your influence on Naru is pretty well established at this point." The man shrugged, approaching the trio. Kakugo stated casual, "Well, it's a positive thing. Kept us off the radar this long. But, admittedly, this island is too small for a good run." Saiken lets out a tight breath. "Your idea of a good run is like 200 kilometers. You'll tear that temporary body to pieces if you keep this up." Kakugo shrugged carelessly as Naruto hands him a bottle of water from the fridge. He takes a sip before he countered. "It is a good idea to test the limits of these enhanced nature clones. We lack most of our raw power in them, so knowing their limits is the best way to understand how to defend ourselves." Naruto replied to that, as he checks on the barrel connections beneath the bar. "Although I approve, I must ask you not to take that too seriously. It'll be a long time before I allow you to do combat in those things." Standing back up after rescuing the last tap, Naruto looks over at them all. "Those bodies of yours aren't perfect, and without Kurama here, to help with the yin-yang balance, creating new ones will be a long time off. Keep that in mind." All three nodded, understanding that, so he continued. "Anyway, please remind Isobu that I expect him back tonight, and Shukaku is not to start another war with the holiday kids. Last thing we need is a game of Sand Fortress 2 on our hands." Matabi giggled as she leaned forward. "I swear you worry too much." Naruto glared at her as he rebuffed, "Because you all are far too carefree. The second Kurama leaves, you guys are all over the place." Another new voice, deep and mellow. "He has a very good point there." The two ladies groaned at that voice, glancing back as Kakugo nodded to the two men who entered, with classic bodybuilders with darker tanned skin, carrying supplies in from the shed. Naruto nodded back, then responded, "Thank you, Yuki. Son Goku. These three just don't get it." The ginger-bearded Son Goku chuckled lightly. "Of course they don't. All they do is have fun mingling with the humans all day long, like they've wanted to ever since father passed. Yuki nodded as they dropped the small kegs onto the floor beside Naruto, who moved them into position to replace the low batch. He added, "Without proper supervision, they'd probably getting all crazy and forget about the rest of us." Saiken pouted, puffing her cheeks somewhat adorably. Matabi just narrowed her eyes on the hulk figure of the Eight Tails human form. Kakuo just shrugged casually, then stated dismissively, "Yeah, probably." Naruto muttered as he pulls out one of the soon-to-be-replaced kegs. "At least you're honest, Kakuo." Said Five Tails just shrugged. Kakuo continued blandly, "You just forced to spell me if I lied." Naruto paused and looked at the man, before smiling sweetly. "Oh, you make me sound like a dictator when you word it that way. Surely, you don't mean that, right?" All the human-looking beasts on the island gulped at that tone. Even the ones who hadn't heard it directly felt it and followed their hidden protocol. Ever since they tried the enhanced yin-yang release clones, at Kurama's insistence, Naruto has been developing certain traits. A mother hen type trait. They were his kids. He treated them like kids. Some didn't mind, mainly Isobu and Shukaku. Some managed to be promoted to irresponsible teenagers, Saiken and Matabi. A few got to be the responsible teenagers, mainly Son Goku, Yuki, and Kakuo. Chomei and Kurama are both responsible adult teenagers that Naruto doesn't really keep track of too hard. As long as he hears from them once a day, he's cool with that. Chomei is religious in his timing. Exactly 8 in the evening without fail he'll arrive, give his daily report and then either sleep or go out again. Kurama only reports every other night, or if the skulk manages something noteworthy enough to brag about. Right now, though, that sweet smile upon reminds Kakuo that he could be demoted at any moment if he annoys Naruto enough and be regulated to the shop's immediate vicinity like Matabi and Saiken. He can kiss his long runs goodbye. Swallowing spit, Kakuo acted bashful and replied, "Of course not, Narian. I just mean to say that you take such good care of us that I would be wrong to mislead you." Naruto nodded before returning to the barrels, and the other two in the irresponsible category let out relieved sighs, for different reasons of course. Saiken doesn't want to deal with Kokuo's constant whinging about not being let out. Matabi doesn't want to have to tiptoe around as Kakuo will totally stop her from getting free food and drinks from stupid human men. This is why she's in the irresponsible teenager category, as Naruto had caught her in the act 3 times. One more time and she'll be forced back into the seal and remain until Kurama got back. Kuo Town. Kurama returned his den after another successful hunt leading the new 12-strong hunter skulk. He never really thought he'd have this much fun leading a group of his fellow foxes whilst using them to keep an eye out for that particular devil family. Someone had to. Him and his siblings discussed this when Son Goku had distracted Naruto with talks about the new blade they were to forge. The arrival of the foreign goddess of the forests actually scared Naruto more than he let on. The revelation that the forests here could potentially act as beacons toward finding him led to the sage having nightmares for a few days. They, as a group, had to actively shield him from himself, and it was driving him into a spiral of not sleeping and instead relying on either theirs or nature's energy to keep moving. Heck, even Diedrich could tell something wasn't right, and he just got there. When they strolled past by a tourist shop in Kochi, Saiken pointed out the islands to the south could be isolated enough to be overlooked. Isobu offered to take them. When they got there, they worked on keeping him calm and in one place, a vacation of sorts. It took them a while. Kurama got him focused on the enhanced clones, which intrigued and distracted the boy long enough for him to calm down. With him surrounded by the sea and sand, the nature was abundant without being within a forest, so his sage mode can still be used and kept him calm. A win-win. Now though, he came back to find his skulk gathering together and fellow foxes had begun to arrive. Each time their hunters came back they'd find another lost kinsman. The new bark had developed during his stay. Now then, his last thoughts before he fell asleep to report back via their joint mindscape of the fact that the academy has finally been rebuilt. The devil presence upped significantly. Their target has returned to his home. That Kuo has become a melting pot of every single faction has members sneaking around here in the last week. The Yukai had scouts. Fallen had at least one listening post disguised as a bar in town. The church on the hill, an 8-wing angel had been spotted hanging around there. 2 of those hunters had a camp in the same forest they lived in. They thought they were sneaky. His kin found them as they moved in. Seems the whole world is watching and waiting for them to show up here again. Kurama will use his new leader status perfectly to keep track of everything happening in this town. He jerked up at that, bewildered at the fact he's basically a spy master right now. When did that happen? Kyoto Shrine Amaterasu appeared before the bowing Yasaka and spoke immediately. Yasaka-chan, rise up and tell me why you are reaching out for me. Yasaka does so and began to explain immediately after her own golden eyes meet the goddess. I need your help, Lady Amaterasu. The goddess of the sun folded her arm and leaned on her right leg. Amaterasu stated seriously, what do you need? Yasaka replied swiftly. I have had my people scouring the nation's most isolated forests and mountain trails. There hasn't been a single flare-up either, so I ask if you can locate the sage for us. I fear that the devils might have. She paused upon the goddess's raised hand. Amaterasu smiled before she answered. The sage, as you call him, is safe and sound. However, I am not at liberty to speak of his location. Yasaka was surprised at that. Her boss is not only aware of the one she has been looking for but is also aware of his location and possibly even shielding him from them. Speaking up, Yasaka asked. Are you shielding him from us? Amaterasu shook her head, then explained calmly. No, not at all. I am not doing that as it would draw attention. Attention I am sure will send him further into hiding. I am unwilling to allow that as long as he remains in our domain.
Yasaka nodded slowly, understanding that the sage was still under the Shinto Pantheon's reach but not directly being observed. This means he is still in the country. Yet she had an inkling of something and voiced her inquiry. I see. But then, based on your words, you know his name and...
Again, the leader of the Yukai faction paused upon the raised hand of Amaterasu, who replied firmly. Do not ask me of that again, Yasaka-chan. Am I understood? Yasaka nodded, bowing promptly. Forgive my mistake. I meant no disrespect. The goddess let out a tired sigh, rubbing her eyes. Amaterasu explained. It is not your fault, Yasaka-chan. Just that the knowledge I have found on him is both uplifting and inspiring, but also gut-wrenching and heartbreaking. I owe him his privacy. Yasaka nodded, again taking that to heart. The sage's past was enough that even the goddess of the sun dared not recall. A tough pill to swallow and most likely explained his behavior too. Amaterasu continued as she locked on to the Kyuubi with a smile. I will tell you this though. You two have a connection that is truly unique that I was not expecting. Ever wondered why he was so protective of you? Yasaka does not. Wait, he said he'd deal with that thing as thanks. Was that not the... Amaterasu smirked wickedly, while she informed her subordinate. No, he did not do that on a whim. I suggest that you give up finding him as he will not allow himself to be found. However, should you ever fall into danger and truly need the sage's help, Kuno will call upon him and I know that he will answer without hesitation. Underworld, a voice called out from the shadow of an alleyway. Issei Hyodo. Said boy froze mid-step, glancing down the dark path in the shadow of a shop on this town within Gremory territory. He had come out here to take a break from constantly swinging his new sword around. Kiba had been drilling him on its use since his first request 2 months ago. He has no talent for it, just determination that the fallen tears of his president had reinforced. Now though, peering down into the dark alleyway, Issei finds his neck hairs on end. Eventually, he answered back. Who are you and how do you know my name? Upon those questions being asked, 3 figures step out of the darkness but remain concealed with the shade. Though, one of the taller 2 had a familiar-looking white gauntlet on his arm that catches the young devil's eyes. Issei muttered, "Is that?" The gauntlet is raised towards the figure's face and glows a little bright to show a handsome silver-haired teen's face that was impassively staring back at the pawn. He spoke. My name is Valley. The white dragon to your red. We came here to offer you a chance to get back at your tormentor. Issei's eyes harden, now glaring at the teen, muttering. Why should I trust you? I was meant to fight you, you know? Valley nodded once, frowning as he replies. That's what is told to us, yes. It is also why I am standing here, giving you this opportunity. Issei looked unconvinced, knowing just how powerful his target is, so asked. Do you even know how powerful Menma is? He's strong. Like crazy strong. Not even the Satans could beat him. The second figure steps forward, his fur-lined red armor glinting in the low light, staff resting on his shoulder as he spoke with a grin. That's where you misunderstand things, little devil. My name is Bijuu, monkey sage and descendant of Sun Wukong. Issei eyed this new guy warily. If he was a sage like Menma is, then he is likely similarly powerful and not one to take lightly. A monkey sage. How is that different from the sixth path sage? Bijuu kept his grin despite the unease he got at the mention of the title, shrugging as he replied with confidence. Who's to say? Sages rarely go head to head, so it should be fun. The final figure steps forward. His blonde hair reminded the pawn of a certain knight back at the manor, but the glinting glasses told that they were most definitely not the same person as he spoke calmly. We have heard rumors of this sage of six paths and are working on a plan to bring him down. We just need a few more players. Issei didn't think they were being serious, but looking at these three very powerful people, the White Dragon Emperor, another sage, and this last guy is setting off all his devil senses the wrong way. Then again, they seem like they are really going to try, which leads him to ask, why me? You know I lost my dragon, right? All I have is a dead gear. To emphasize his point, he summons his cracked, dull gray, white-orbed gauntlet, and holds it up much like Valley did, which drew all their eyes, and surely enough the crack spread from the inner arm out was noteworthy. In all their centuries of use, none of the dragon gears had ever taken such damage. This was more than a little interesting, with the last hidden member being heard next, stating, not possible. How did that happen? Issei noticed the orb had rippled as it spoke, must be like how he and Diedrich used to be able to do, so answered. I went for a full-powered punch, and he knocked it away with his black metal staff with a weird design, and this was the result. Bijuu spoke up, correcting the young devil. Shakuho. It's called a shakuho, kid. A weapon of his sages. Rare for even one of his sages to wield. My staff can handle that though. He looks to his two colleagues, who look back before they all lock on the young devil. Valley asked. So, Issei Hyodo, what is your answer? Will you join us? Issei was conflicted. These people looked like they were gearing up and had a serious chance at beating that guy. He was still in training. Training that has slowed since Akeno disappeared on a mission from Bucko. If he goes, then he can help bring that guy down. Maybe learn a thing or two from them all, but he might be considered a rogue though. Seeing his hesitation, Valley, in a rare sign of compassion, not really, decides for him, you know.
Gaining everyone's attention, as his gauntlet vanishes, allowing Valley to pocket his hands as he continued. I can see you are busy training with a sword. Once we find the sage's location, we will come get you. How's that sound?
Issei's hesitation lowered at that, and Valley's two teammates recognized the plan and acted accordingly. With a magic circle appearing on the ground, the blonde with a hand above it as a new sword slowly appeared up through it, as he offered. Indeed. As a show of good faith, I shall gift this little blade for your use. It is my old one and lacks any holy elements, so it will be safe for your usage. The sword appeared at first look to be a standard weapon of average length with a standard brass crossguard, and the sheath was a royal blue with basic brass detailings around the top, down the sides and at the tip. Again, a standard sword, but little did the former dragon know. This sword the uncanny ability to repair itself with the application of magic. As Issei takes hold of the sword, it felt like he was putting on a fitted glove and was perfectly weighted. Grinning, he lifted it from the holster, and the brilliant silver rippled with a sudden green undertone in reaction to absorbing his magic slightly. Nodding his approval, Issei looked back up to find himself alone again. That didn't matter. He had a sword of his own now and didn't need to ask for one from Kiba anymore. Another step forward to defeating Menma. With a new sense of accomplishment, Issei returned to the street, sword on hip, and headed back to the Gremory estate. His training needs to be intensified. He was unaware that the three watched him, and all three grinned darkly at this fool casually accepting such a cursed item without hesitation. He will be useful to their plans. Takamagahara Hermes leads Hera through the streets of the Shinto pantheon, directly towards the large imperial palace that laid ahead of them. It was a refreshing change of pace for Hera, as it was not every day she was allowed to walk in the heavenly realms of other pantheons, unlike Hermes, who is constantly on the road delivering packages. The golden sky, the gentle sun, and the heavenly aroma of the fresh natural air was all very different from the heights of her own home, that Hera felt refreshed just being here. The giant armored doors part upon their approach, revealing Hachiman in his heavenly armor, and the duo of Greeks stop before him. Glancing between them, he nods to Hermes, who spoke. Right, I will be back in a few days as I have a few deliveries nearby. Hachiman nodded, allowing the delivery man of the Celestial to leave promptly, before turning to the Queen of the Greeks, and grunting, "This way." Hera just nodded and followed after the Shinto counterpart to her son Ares, and stepchildren, Apollo and Artemis. Even though it is not a complete one-to-one. They had traveled in silence. The decorations were regal yet tasteful, and Hera could appreciate the effort put into the decor. Halfway to their destination, they came across a small cross-junction, where Susanoo and Okunanushi were discussing something. When Hachiman's armor caught their attention, they both glanced over before Okunanushi whispered something before departing. After nodding his fellow deity off, Susanoo turned to Hachiman and asked, "Are you heading to the council room?" Hachiman nodded, as the god of storms, wind, fields, and the harvest falls into step with him. Susanoo inclined his head towards Hera. "Fair day, Lady Hera." Hera just nodded back. "To you too." A scant few minutes later they entered the meeting room, to find Amaterasu sitting at the table's head, calm, collected, and relaxed in her regal position as leader of the Shinto pantheon. On her left sat none other than Tsukuyomi, who was clearly keeping an eye on his Greek counterpart, Artemis at his side. Said goddess of the moon looked up to see her queen instead of her father, or brother at least. Artemis had hoped that either Apollo or Zeus would be the one to come, but it seems that Hera has taken it upon herself here. She did not know whether that was a good or bad thing. Amaterasu stood and smiled warmly. "Queen Hera of the Greek pantheon. Welcome to Takamagahara, our home. Please, take a seat. We have much to discuss." Hera returned the smile and took said seat, and the sun goddess returned to hers. Hera then replied, "I thank you for the invitation. Even if it is under these unfortunate circumstances, I honestly cannot fault your decision and stance on this whole affair." The dark-haired beauty known as the Shinto goddess of the sun nodded with a smile still upon her sharp-featured face, her fiery eyes fixed on the Greek goddess of childbirth. Amaterasu nodded. "Well, things have been rather difficult as of late, with many other pantheons all poking around our territory. It is regretful that this has taken place, and we are only now able to tackle it." Hera smiles again, glancing at Artemis, who was looking well taken care of despite everything. A swift inclination of her head told the queen that nothing was wrong with her, so Hera focused back on the other side of the table back at Amaterasu and pressed, "I do not doubt that. We ourselves are rather taken with what we have heard from our own nature spirits and deities of the happenings here in the East." Amaterasu's smile turned sly briefly, knowing that as putting it mildly, before nodding at that accurate statement, telling earnestly, "I do not doubt that." It was a surprise for many. She let a breath before growing firm and voice stiffening up. "That being said, it does not excuse the fact that one of yours had snuck into our domain and attempted to directly interfere with our internal affairs. Care to explain your actions and what compensation we are to receive due to this infringement?" Hera did not lose her stern composure when she nodded once, then replied, "Lady Amaterasu, from what we understand, this entity has no ties to any pantheon. I agree that we have stepped over a line with the act of not informing you of our intentions within your territory. However, the insinuation that we are attempting to meddle with your internal matters is a bit of a stretch." Susanoo spoke next, arching a brow with arms crossed. "An interesting idea you have there. What makes you say that?" Hera glanced at the large bulk of the samurai of the storms and offered back, "My sister, Demeter, is obviously very interested in this matter and driven in her desire for a connection with it. Her domains are heavily influenced by this being. A being that she has never met. This means that this sage is not of any pantheon, not even yours." She ended whilst looking at the sun goddess, who had held her smile but did not respond immediately. Instead, Tsukuyomi did, speaking softly. "What is the point you are making with such a statement, Queen Hera? That you are free to harass our people that reside within our domain, under our protection, as much as you wish as long as it does not interfere with us directly. Is that not rather arrogant of you?" Hera glances to the man who addressed her. "Not at all. I do not wish to stray off the subject matter of our intrusion in your lands. That is the crime here, not the accusation of our involvement with your internal affairs. We did no such thing." Hachiman spoke next. "We did not accuse you of such. We were pointing out the fact that your goddess of the moon had directly interfered with our domain. As did your sun god, both blinding their local counterparts' ability to see our territory in such a way to hide their actions." Hera glanced at her escort briefly, but looked at Amaterasu again. "As I have already mentioned, we are here for the intrusion of ourselves upon your territorial lands. That is why we are here. Let us not get off subject or we shall be running in circles. I get enough of that from my own, and it would be in rather bad taste to bring that here among you all. Joined Mindscape Naruto sat on a branch of the largest, thickest tree beneath the full night sky that lacked the moon. As he leaned against the trunk, foot dangling off the edge, he is soon joined by a normally sized fox with 9 tails and scarlet eyes, and he smiles. You're late, Kurama. Kurama chuckled as he sat on his hunches on the branch, replying promptly. Brat. I am not my siblings, and you are neither my parents, so cut it out. Glancing at the fox who had joined him, Naruto raised a brow as he asked. I never said I was. Where did that come from? Kurama looks back at his container, replying. Yuki mentioned it. You have turned into a little bit of a mother hen, babying my siblings. Naruto snorted, shaking his head as he looks back out at the clearing, stating, if they weren't so troublesome, I wouldn't have to. We'll be caught at this rate. Kurama sighed, shaking his head. Naruto, it has been 6 weeks since you got there. No one has found you, right? Naruto side-eyed the Kyuubi, replying icily, way to jinx it. Kurama returned the favor with a sideways glance, grinning. Can't let you get rusty serving drinks behind a bar now, can I? Naruto huffed, looking up at the starry night sky, before asking, so, how's the kids doing? The others? Kurama smiled wide, tails wagging excitedly. A few of the younger ones are learning how to speak. It is only a matter of time before we have a few more hunting teams, and the network will likely spread faster once they do. Naruto nodded with a small smile himself, replying, an animal spy network. Quick thinking, Kurama. I happen to know that Ishibumi has been enjoying swimming among the coral reefs offshore. He'll likely be the second network. Kurama chuckled, shaking his muzzle. Never thought he'd be so motivated. He is normally the slowest to react. Naruto snorted, replying, you've never seen him around fruit tarts. If he moved any faster, I'd have to pull out the Thunder God technique. Kurama cackled at that, disbelieving that, and the two fell into a laughing rhythm with one another. It didn't last too long, but it was cathartic for them both. This was the longest both had been apart from one another in Naruto's entire life. After a while their laughs fell off, and Kurama looks to his friend and asked, how are you holding out? Naruto looks back. His smile was small but sincere as he spoke. Mata and Saiken say that I have improved. I don't see it, but also not going to argue with them. Women can't be reasoned with rationally, so. Kurama chuckled lightly at that, nodding his approval, saying, I do not doubt their analysis. You are one of us, Naruto. They care about you just as you do us. Please don't be so stubborn and dismiss their goodwill. Naruto sighed, hard, before slowly looking to the fox and replies, I guess you would know. Fine. I will listen to them more. Kurama nodded his head, before recalling something his men had discovered in the forest. Before I forget, we stumbled upon a 2-tailed black cat in the forest, approaching the dens. The hunter's skulk ran her off, but. Naruto nodded, replying, I'll keep an ear out for her. Anything stand out about her, besides the whole 2 tails thing? Kurama shook his head, replying, from what the 6 told me, she escaped up a tree and they lost her when she passed through the leaves. Naruto narrowed his eyes thoughtfully, pondering this information. Kurama continued, she's been hanging around and popping in every so often. I haven't confronted her myself, but she is very persistent. Naruto nodded, speaking airily. The old couple will be back to full health in a week. We will leave as soon as you get back. He turns to the fox, eyes hard. I have a bad feeling about things. It's been growing for a long time, and in all honesty, I am really unsettled by it. Kurama nodded, knowing that a person's instincts are to be listened to as a fox himself, so replied. I will leave before midday. Should be back in 4 days. Naruto nodded seriously, adding, remember to recharge your chakra before you leave, then after you pass Shikoku. Last thing we need is for those in Kyoto sensing you. Kurama snorted, Naruto, who do you think I am? Shukaku? Naruto gave him a dry look, speaking flatly. Kurama, it is because it's you I am saying this. If Yoko-san detects you, things will be really complicated and stuff. They'll chase us literally to the end of the world to have another Kyuubi around. Kurama doesn't reply, just huffed, snout in the air. Becky's choral Naruto finally opens his eyes to the basement of the bar where they have set up shop. Taking a deep breath, He stands from his futon to stretch out a bit and get blood pumping through his muscles again. A knock on the door up to the main floor, and in stepped Matabi, who peeked down the stairs, asking, "Naru?" Naruto sighs before replying, "Mata." Moments later, the human form Nekomata appeared before Naruto, who was going through basic stretches before bed. She was in her fluffy gray sleeping gown but barefoot. Matabi whispered, "How is Kurama doing?" Naruto shrugged before he took a seat back on his bedroll. "Fine. He'll be back in a few days. We'll leave when he does." Matabi sighs as she follows him down, sitting beside her host, before asking, "Are you sure we have to go? I mean, we are safe here, no?"
Naruto turned his head to her, face stern. "We thought that before, remember? Now we have to stay out of the forests. Log knows what we going to have to deal with in a whole new world. A world full of all manner of things we have never encountered before. Mata, we are never safe. Do not ever think that."
She swallowed tightly, looking away and clearly upset at that fact, Matabi whispering, "I'm sorry, Naru-kun." Now Naruto felt bad inside, face meeting palm mumbling into his hand before finally looking back at his tenant, saying, "I am sorry, Mata, it's just." She looks to him, clearly seeing the worry, concern, and a bit of fear on Naruto's face as he bit his lip. Naruto whispered beneath a breath, "I promised you all. I promise that you will never have to worry about humans abusing any of you for your power. Now, after 2 years on the run, we end up in this." He gestured all around as if that answered the question for him, continuing after a breath. "A whole world of powerful gods, goddesses, devils, angels and everything in between. Dangers are everywhere and I still have no idea where." Naruto pauses when Matabi began to rub his back unprompted. Looking to her, seeing her smile, about to ask what she's doing when Matabi spoke first. "First of all, breathe." He does so without question, and upon his completion, not halting her actions, Matabi continued, "Secondly, you need to let us help you more. We are in this together and we have nothing but absolute faith in you, our youngest kin. You have done so much for us that we worry about what we can do to repay you for your efforts." Naruto was going to interject but found her finger across his lips. Matabi did not stop speaking. "Thirdly, we are worried about you. You almost had a mental breakdown after that confrontation with that goddess of the forest. It's why Kurama ordered us to rest here." She hushed him before continuing, "Fourth, your health is our priority. Physical or mental, we are all in this together. So please, for my sake, talk to me at least. If things get a bit much, talk to me. I promise I won't tell anyone, and it'll be between the two of us, okay? We're partners in crime after all." She whispered from the last question, pulling her finger away from across his lips, and Naruto nodded silently, before looking forward at the stacks of crates. They sat in silence for a few minutes, which was broken by her leaning against the sage, but nothing beyond that. Eventually, a good 3 minutes later, Naruto spoke again, in a whisper. "Mata, I have been having a really bad feeling lately. Like, something is closing in on me and I can't even tell from where." He glances at her, resting against his shoulder, continuing, "It feels like I'm missing something critical, forgetting something important. It's driving me crazy." Matabi thought on those words, unwilling to dismiss them, as Naruto's gut feelings are normally correct. Only 3 times they weren't, but they had bailed him out those times. Kakugo, although she herself has complained about him running the perimeter of the island for fun, is also keeping an eye out for any trouble or hotspots for such to develop. Ishibumi is doing the same thing out to sea whilst playing with the wildlife and building friendships. Dryag and Shomei has been surveying the entire island and is getting regular reports of the humans from his fellow insects that are native to the island. Gyuki is often talking with the delivery and logistics companies and finding out the latest gossip that Son Goku then investigates. Kurama obviously is keeping an eye out for that dragon brat and building up the foxes there to a spy force. Then she and Saiken are on local defense and medical support for Naruto. Not that he is aware of this though, as his stress levels was way too high when they first arrived. They all decided to take care of him for once. Instead, Matabi pulled off his shoulder and pulled Naruto's face back to look into her eyes, and she smiled. "I think you've spent too much time cooped up in here. So, tomorrow we are going to town and have a good, relaxing time." Naruto objected to this. "Mata, did you not?" He froze upon her glare, hearing the almost imperceptible groan from her throat. Naruto swallowed spit, allowing Matabi a chance to speak. "Naruto, are you questioning me?" He shakes his head once, and she nodded before smiling softly. Good. Now then, let's get some sleep. Again, Naruto went to argue with her, but a raised eyebrow forced his silence. She nodded as they shifted into the futon and Matabi pulled him over her and snuggled back into his warmth. The sage sighed silently into his bedmate's dark blue hair, his concluding thoughts. Kurama, I hope you were right about this. This it for today guys, this was the part 1 of What If Naruto was the Jinchuuriki of 9 Bijuu X High School DxD. Stay tuned for more.